Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving straight into the Bible for a really fascinating textual study of the daily bread titled Forgiven Much, Forgive Much. Specifically, we're going to be camping out in Matthew chapter 18, verses 21 through 35. What we're really looking at here is the profound, undeniable connection between the mercy we receive and the mercy we are called to give.
And to get right to the heart of it, the Bible immediately confronts us with the inescapable logic of the master. Let's look at Matthew 18:32-33. It says, "Then the master called the servant in. 'You wicked servant,' he said, 'I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you?'" This right here, this is the core finding of our entire study. Receiving infinite mercy absolutely demands showing mercy in return. It really is the main argument we'll be tracking today.
So here is how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll outline the big picture of mercy. Then, we'll get into the historical context of the debt, followed by the master's compassionate cancellation and the fellow servant's debt. After that, we'll compare willpower versus gospel forgiveness. And finally, we'll wrap up with a conclusion on how to actually release the debt.
All right, let's jump right into section 1, the big picture of mercy, going beyond counting.
Now, a little context. Peter genuinely thought he was being extremely generous by offering to forgive someone 7 times. I mean, he was literally doubling the religious standard of his day, so he was probably expecting a pat on the back. But Jesus responds in a way that is just totally shocking. He says, not 7 times, but 77 times. Basically, he's telling Peter, stop counting altogether. Jesus then introduces a parable to explain a massive shift. We forgive without limit, not by sheer willpower or some kind of spiritual achievement, but simply because of what has already been forgiven for us.
Which brings us to section 2, the historical context of debt. We really need to grasp the numbers here to understand the weight of the story.
Look at the sheer scale of these two debts. The evidence for our main argument really hinges on this comparison. The first servant owes 10,000 talents. To put that into perspective, a single talent was roughly 20 years of wages. So 10,000 talents? We're talking the equivalent of billions of dollars today. It was more than the entire annual tax revenue of the Roman province of Judea. It's an absurd, laughable, and completely unpayable debt. Now compare that to the second debt of 100 denarii. That's roughly 100 days' wages. Sure, it's a real debt, it's annoying, but it's absolutely tiny by comparison.
Moving on to section 3, the master's compassionate cancellation, where the unpayable debt is erased.
So even though the servant's promise to somehow pay back billions of dollars was just absurd on its face, the king, who's deeply moved with compassion, does something completely unthinkable. There was no installment plan, there was no reduced settlement, no drawn-out negotiation. The king simply canceled the entire staggering debt and let him walk free. The servant's only move had been to fall on his knees and beg, throwing himself entirely on the king's mercy.
And this, you guys, perfectly illustrates the gospel. It represents our staggering debt to God. Every single sin, rebellion, and failure to love Him and our neighbor. That's our 10,000 talents. It's a debt we could never, ever work off, but which He compassionately canceled. Not because we promised to do better, but because Jesus paid what we owed on the cross. It is literally the most expensive act of mercy in human history.
Now for the heartbreaking twist in section 4, the fellow servant's debt. Infinite mercy, zero grace.
Instead of being transformed by this incredible gift, the forgiven servant walks right out of the throne room and immediately finds a fellow servant who owes him roughly 100 days' wages. And what does he do? He literally grabs him by the throat and violently demands payment. The fellow servant falls down and begs, "Be patient with me and I will pay it back." Notice anything? He's using the exact same words the first servant had just used with the king. Yet the first servant flat out refuses to show any mercy and actually has him thrown into prison.
This devastating turn of events isn't primarily just a strict command to forgive. It's a diagnosis. It's a diagnosis of a heart that hasn't actually reckoned with the infinite mercy it just received. The servant knew he'd been forgiven, sure, but he hadn't let it actually change him. You see, when the 10,000 talents truly become real to you, that 100 denarii suddenly becomes impossible to hold over someone else's head.
Let's explore why that is in section 5, willpower versus gospel forgiveness. We'll look at 2 very different theories here.
So, we have 2 contrasting theories of forgiveness. On the one side, we have what we call grinding teeth forgiveness. This is when you decide to let an offense go purely by sheer white-knuckled willpower. Honestly, it's exhausting. On the other side, though, we have gospel-rooted forgiveness. Forgiveness that flows from the gospel isn't about grinding your teeth and forcing yourself to let it go. Instead, it's the natural overflow of honestly reckoning with what God has already canceled for you. It's releasing a debt simply because you know exactly what immense, unpayable debt was released for you.
Which leads us perfectly to our conclusion in Section 6, releasing the debt and how to actually live it out. So how do we actually take this massive theological reality and apply it to our daily lives? Well, the text provides a super clear step-by-step process for us. Step 1, sit with the sheer number and reality of your own unpayable debt. Really feel the weight of those 10,000 talents. Step 2, receive the king's mercy, deeply understanding that your debt is canceled. Step 3, name honestly before God the specific person you are refusing to forgive, recognizing that they are in the exact same condition before God as you were. And finally, Step 4, consciously choose to release their debt.
Now, a really crucial point to remember here is that true forgiveness doesn't mean ignoring the very real consequences of the hurt. It absolutely doesn't mean pretending the pain wasn't real. Rather, it's a deliberate decision to stop acting as the debt collector. You are actively choosing not to make them keep paying you back through coldness, distance, or constantly keeping score.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this challenging final question to chew on. Where in your life are you holding a small debt over someone when God has canceled something infinitely larger for you? Which type of forgiveness are you operating from right now, and whose debt do you consciously need to release today? Let that land. Thank you so much for exploring the Bible with me today, and keep learning.